The rain hammered against the tall windows of Ravenswood Castle. Inside, Duke Alexander Blackthorne stood frozen in his study. His hands shook as he read the letter again. The words burned into his mind like fire. Your Grace must produce an heir within 1 year. Failure to do so will result in the loss of your title and lands to your cousin Lord Edmund Blackthorne. The king's seal stared back at him, cold, final, unforgiving. Alexander was 35 years old, the most powerful duke in all of England. He owned lands that stretched beyond the horizon. Gold filled his vaults. Servants bowed at his feet. But none of that mattered now, because Alexander Blackthorne had a secret so shameful he had never spoken it aloud. Not to his closest friends, not to his advisors, not even to himself in the mirror. He had never been with a woman. The thunder crashed outside, as if the very heavens mocked his predicament. Alexander crumpled the letter in his fist. His chest heaved with each breath. Panic clawed at his throat like a wild beast. 1 year seemed impossible. But then he read the letter again. His blood turned to ice. The letter was dated 11 months ago. Somehow it had been lost, hidden, delayed. Alexander had only 3 weeks left. 3 weeks to find a wife. 3 weeks to produce an heir. 3 weeks to do what he had never done before. Alexander stumbled backward. His legs hit the chair behind his massive oak desk. He collapsed into it, his head falling into his hands. The Duke of Ravenswood, feared by enemies and respected by allies, felt tears sting his eyes. How could he explain his condition? How could he tell anyone that the great Duke Alexander had never even kissed a woman properly? That his body trembled with fear at the very thought of intimacy? When Alexander was 12, his father had died in a terrible accident. His mother, Lady Catherine, had grown cold and distant. She spoke only of duty, of responsibility, of the burden of being a Blackthorne. Love was weakness, she said. Passion was foolishness. A duke must be above such base desires, she would tell him daily. Your body exists only to serve the family name. His mother had died when Alexander turned 25. By then, the damage was done. He feared women. He feared intimacy. He feared his own desires. Years passed. Alexander threw himself into managing his estates. He became known as the Ice Duke, cold, calculating, untouchable. No one suspected the truth. No one knew that beneath his perfect exterior lived a man terrified of his own manhood. And now time had run out. Alexander stood and walked to the window. The storm raged outside, but inside his heart an even greater tempest brewed. Lighting illuminated the grounds of his estate. In the distance he could see the small cottage where his groundskeeper lived. That's when he saw her. A woman ran through the rain toward the castle. Her dark hair flew behind her like a banner. Her dress clung to her body, soaked through by the storm. She stumbled and fell, then picked herself up and kept running. Something about her desperation called to him. Alexander rushed from his study, his boots echoing through the marble halls of Ravenswood Castle. He reached the front doors just as she arrived. She pounded on the heavy wooden doors with both fists. Her voice carried over the thunder. "Please, help me. I beg you." Alexander threw open the doors. The woman stumbled inside, gasping and shaking. Water dripped from her clothes onto his marble floor. Her green eyes blazed with fear and determination. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for letting me in." Alexander stared at her. She was beautiful in a wild, untamed way. Her hair was the color of rich chocolate. Her skin glowed despite being wet and cold. But it was her eyes that captured him. They held depths he had never seen before, pain and strength mixed together like wine and water. "What are you running from?" Alexander asked. His voice came out rougher than he intended. "My stepfather," she said between gasps for air. He sold me to Lord Camden. Tomorrow, I'm supposed to go to his bed. Lord Camden is 70 years old. He has buried 3 wives already. I won't be his 4th. Alexander's hands clenched into fists. Lord Camden was known throughout the county for his cruelty. The man collected young wives like other men collected horses. He used them until they broke, then found new ones. "What is your name?" Alexander asked. "Isabella," she said. "Isabella Morrison. My mother died 3 years ago. My stepfather has debts, gambling debts. Lord Camden agreed to pay them in exchange for me." Isabella's voice broke on the last words. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering from cold and fear. Alexander felt something stir inside his chest, something he had never experienced before. It wasn't just desire, though he felt that too. It was protectiveness. This woman needed him. She had come to his castle seeking shelter, and he would not turn her away. But an idea began forming in his mind. A desperate, impossible idea. "How old are you, Isabella?" he asked. 22, Your Grace. "And you are unmarried?" Isabella nodded, confusion clear in her green eyes. Alexander took a deep breath. The words that came next would change everything. "Marry me?" he said. Isabella's eyes went wide. She stepped backward, her hand flying to her throat. "What? Marry me tonight? Right now? I need a wife, and you need protection from Lord Camden. We can help each other. But you don't know me. I'm nobody. Just a poor girl whose mother married poorly. You're a duke. You could have any woman in England." Alexander almost laughed at the bitter irony. Yes, he could have any woman in England, but he had never wanted any of them. His fear had kept him isolated, untouched, alone. "I have my reasons," he said carefully, "and you have yours. This arrangement would benefit us both." Isabella stared at him for a long moment. Alexander could see her mind working, weighing her options. Outside, the thunder crashed again, as if reminding her what waited beyond these walls. "If I married you," she said slowly, "what would you expect from me?" Alexander's chest tightened. This was the moment he would have to reveal his shameful secret. But perhaps not all of it. Not yet. "I would expect you to be my Duchess, to bear my children, to help me secure my bloodline." Isabella's cheeks flushed pink. I don't know anything about being with a man." Her confession hit Alexander like a physical blow. She was innocent, pure, just like him. "That makes 2 of us," he whispered before he could stop himself. Isabella's eyes widened. "What did you say?" Alexander realized his mistake immediately. He had revealed too much. But looking into Isabella's trusting green eyes, he found he couldn't take it back. "I said that makes 2 of us. I have never been with a woman either." The silence stretched between them, like a chasm. Alexander waited for her to laugh, to mock him, to run away in disgust. What woman could want a man who was still a virgin at 35? Instead, Isabella stepped closer. "Truly?" she asked softly. Alexander nodded, his throat too tight to speak. "But why? You're handsome. You're powerful. Surely women have tried to—" "My mother raised me to believe that desire was weakness," Alexander said. "She taught me to fear intimacy, to see it as a distraction from duty. By the time I realized she was wrong, I was too old, too set in my ways, too afraid. Isabella reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were small and cold against his skin. I understand, she said. My stepfather always said I was worthless, that no man would ever want me except as property to be sold. I began to believe him. Alexander turned his hand palm up, capturing her fingers in his. You are not worthless, he said fiercely. You are brave. You ran through a storm to save yourself. You didn't just accept your fate. That takes courage. Isabella smiled then. The first real smile Alexander had ever seen from her. It transformed her face completely, making her luminous. So we would both be learning together? She asked. Yes, Alexander said. Together. Isabella nodded slowly. Then yes, I'll marry you, Your Grace. Alexander, he corrected. Call me Alexander. Alexander, she repeated, and his name sounded like music on her lips. An hour later, they stood before the castle's chaplain. Father Benedict had been roused from his bed, but he didn't complain. The Duke's word was law in Ravenswood. Isabella wore a simple white dress that the housekeeper had found for her. Her hair had dried into soft waves around her face. She looked like an angel in the candlelight. Alexander wore his finest black jacket with silver buttons. His hands shook as he spoke the vows that would bind them together forever.
Do you, Alexander James Blackthorne, take Isabella Morrison to be your lawfully wedded wife?
I do, Alexander said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Do you, Isabella Morrison, take Alexander James Blackthorne to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do, Isabella whispered. You may kiss your bride. This was the moment Alexander had dreaded. His first real kiss, in front of witnesses, with his new wife watching his every move. Alexander stepped closer to Isabella. She looked up at him with trust and something else, something that might have been affection. He cupped her face gently in his hands. I don't know what I'm doing, he whispered, so quietly only she could hear. Neither do I, she whispered back. We'll figure it out together. Alexander leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was soft, tentative, sweet. Isabella's lips were warm and welcoming. When they separated, Alexander felt dizzy. Congratulations, Your Grace, Father Benedict said with a smile. You are now husband and wife. The small group of servants who had witnessed the ceremony clapped politely. Mrs. Henderson, the head housekeeper, wiped tears from her eyes. Shall I prepare the master suite for the new Duchess? Mrs. Henderson asked. Alexander's stomach clenched with anxiety. The wedding night. The moment he would have to prove himself as a man. The moment his inexperience would be laid bare. Yes, he managed to say. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. As the servants scattered to prepare for the night ahead, Alexander found himself alone with Isabella in the grand foyer. She looked as nervous as he felt. Isabella, he began, but she cut him off. I know what you're going to say, she said. You're going to tell me that we don't have to, that we can wait. But Alexander, we both know why you needed to marry so quickly. The letter you were reading when I arrived. I saw it on your desk. I know you need an heir. Alexander's face flushed red. She had seen the king's letter. She knew his desperation. You don't understand, he said. It's not just about needing an heir. I'm terrified, Isabella. What if I can't? What if I don't know how to? Isabella stepped closer and placed her hand on his chest. His heart hammered against her palm. Then we'll learn together, she said simply. We'll go slowly. We'll be patient with each other. And if we fail tonight, we'll try again tomorrow. Her words calmed something wild in Alexander's chest. This woman, this beautiful, brave woman, was offering him acceptance, understanding, partnership. "Are you certain?" he asked. "I'm certain that I'd rather learn about love with you than submit to Lord Camden's cruelty," Isabella said. "I'm certain that when you kissed me, I felt something I've never felt before. I'm certain that you're a good man, Alexander Blackthorne. The rest we can figure out together." Alexander took her hand and brought it to his lips. He pressed a gentle kiss to her palm. "Then let's go upstairs," he said. The master suite had been prepared beautifully. Candles flickered on every surface, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Rose petals were scattered across the massive bed. A fire crackled in the fireplace, filling the room with warmth and golden light. Isabella stood in the center of the room, her hands clasped in front of her. Alexander closed the door behind them and turned the key in the lock. They were alone, truly alone. Husband and wife. "It's beautiful," Isabella said, looking around the room. "Mrs. Henderson has romantic notions," Alexander said, trying to keep his voice light despite his nervousness. "Alexander," Isabella said softly, "look at me." He turned to face her. Isabella had moved closer to the fireplace. The flames painted her skin with gold and amber. "I need you to know something," she said. "Whatever happens tonight, I'm grateful. You saved me from a terrible fate. You gave me your name, your protection, your home. I will try to be a good wife to you." "Isabella," Alexander said, crossing the room to stand before her, "I need you to know something too. I didn't just marry you for convenience. When I saw you running through the rain, something inside me woke up, something that had been sleeping for 35 years. I don't understand it yet, but I want to." Isabella reached up and touched his face. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, the curve of his lips. "May I kiss you again?" she asked. Alexander nodded, not trusting his voice. This time, when their lips met, the kiss was deeper, longer. Isabella's arms wound around his neck, pulling him closer. Alexander's hands settled on her waist, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. When they separated, both were breathing hard. "That was better," Isabella said with a shy smile. "Much better," Alexander agreed. They spent the next hour simply talking and kissing by the firelight. Alexander told Isabella about his childhood, his fears, his loneliness. Isabella shared stories of her mother, her dreams, her hopes for the future. As the night grew deeper, they grew braver. Alexander's jacket was discarded. Isabella's shoes were kicked aside. They moved slowly, carefully, learning each other's boundaries and desires. "Are you ready?" Alexander asked when they finally stood beside the bed. "Are you?" Isabella countered. "No," Alexander said honestly, "but I want to try with you." What happened next was tender and awkward and beautiful all at once. Two innocent souls discovering passion together. There was nervousness and laughter, gentle touches and whispered encouragements. Alexander was amazed by Isabella's softness, her warmth, her trust. Isabella was surprised by Alexander's tenderness, his patience, his desperate desire to please her. When it was over, they lay entwined in the candlelight, both changed forever. "Was it, did I do it right?" Alexander asked, vulnerability clear in his voice. Isabella turned in his arms and kissed his chest, right over his heart. "It was perfect," she said. "We were perfect together." Alexander held her close, marveling at the miracle of this woman in his arms, his wife, his duchess, his salvation. But even in his happiness, a dark thought crept into his mind. One night together did not guarantee a child. They had 3 weeks to conceive an heir, 3 weeks before Lord Edmund could claim his title and lands, 3 weeks to prove their love was strong enough to create new life. The next morning brought a new crisis. Alexander woke to frantic knocking on his bedroom door. "Your Grace," came the voice of his steward, Mr. Pemberton. "Your Grace, you must come quickly." Alexander pulled on his robe and cracked open the door. Isabella stirred behind him, pulling the sheets up to cover herself. "What is it, Pemberton?" Alexander asked. "Lord Camden is here, Your Grace. He's brought men with him. He's demanding the return of Isabella Morrison. He says she was stolen from him and he wants her back." Alexander's blood ran cold. Isabella sat up in bed, her face white with fear. "He found me," she whispered. "He's come for me." "No," Alexander said firmly. "You're my wife now. He has no claim on you." "He has a contract," Isabella said, her voice shaking. "My stepfather signed papers. Lord Camden paid money for me. He might have legal grounds." Alexander's jaw clenched with fury. "Get dressed," he told Isabella. "We're going to face this together." 20 minutes later, Alexander and Isabella descended the grand staircase of Ravenswood Castle. Lord Camden waited in the foyer with 6 armed men. He was exactly as Isabella had described, a thin, cruel-looking man of 70, with yellowed teeth and calculating eyes. "Your Grace," Lord Camden said with a mocking bow, "I've come for what belongs to me." "Nothing in this castle belongs to you, Camden," Alexander replied coldly. "This woman does." Camden pointed at Isabella, who stood beside Alexander with her chin raised defiantly. "I have a contract signed by her legal guardian. I paid good money for her. She is mine by law." "She is my wife by law," Alexander said. "Married last night before God and witnesses. Your contract is void." Lord Camden's face twisted with rage. "You think you can steal from me, Blackthorne? You think your title protects you from the consequences? I think my wife came to me seeking sanctuary from your cruelty," Alexander said, "and I think any judge in England would agree that marriage supersedes a contract of purchase." The word dripped with disgust. Lord Camden's eyes narrowed to slits. "This isn't over," he snarled. "I'll have satisfaction for this insult. If you threaten my wife again, you'll have more than satisfaction to worry about," Alexander said. His hand moved to the sword at his side. Lord Camden looked at the 6 armed men behind him, then at Alexander standing alone. For a moment, it seemed he might order an attack. Then his gaze shifted to the dozen castle guards who had appeared at strategic positions around the foyer. "Come men," Lord Camden said finally. "We'll settle this through the courts." As Lord Camden and his men rode away, Alexander turned to Isabella. She was shaking despite her brave facade. "He'll be back," she said. "He's not the kind of man who accepts defeat, and he's right about the contract. If my stepfather signed papers, then we'll fight him in court and win," Alexander said. "You're a duchess now, Isabella. You have power behind your name. Camden might intimidate a poor girl, but he can't intimidate the Blackthorne family." Isabella nodded, but Alexander could see the fear still lingering in her eyes. "What if the courts rule in his favor?" she asked quietly. "Then we'll face that when it comes," Alexander said. "But Isabella, I need you to know something. Even if I lose everything, my title, my lands, my fortune, I won't let Camden take you. I'll take you away from here. We'll start over somewhere new. Somewhere he can't reach us." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "You would give up everything for me?" "Everything," Alexander said, without hesitation. "You're my wife, my choice, my love." The word slipped out before Alexander could stop it. Love. He had never said it before, never felt it before. But looking at Isabella's face in the morning light, he knew it was true. "Alexander," Isabella breathed. "Do you mean that?" "I mean it," he said, taking her hands in his. "I love you, Isabella. I know it's been less than a day. I know it sounds impossible, but what I feel for you, it's bigger than anything I've ever experienced." Isabella smiled through her tears. "I love you too," she whispered. "When you opened those doors last night, you didn't just save me from Lord Camden. You saved me from a life without love, without hope." They kissed then, standing in the foyer where they had first met. Around them, the castle staff smiled and pretended not to watch their duke discover happiness for the first time in his life. But their joy was interrupted by another crisis. "Your Grace," Mr. Pemberton said, approaching with obvious reluctance, "there's another matter that requires your attention." "What now?" Alexander sighed. "A messenger has arrived from London, from the king himself." Alexander's stomach dropped. The king's messenger meant official business. And official business regarding Alexander could only mean one thing. "He's here to check on the status of your heir," Pemberton said quietly. Alexander closed his eyes. The 3 weeks he thought he had were gone. The king had sent someone to verify his progress immediately. "Where is the messenger?" Alexander asked. "In your study, Your Grace. He says he has orders to remain until he can report back to His Majesty about your situation." Alexander looked at Isabella. Her face had gone pale again. "What does this mean?" she asked. "It means we're out of time," Alexander said grimly. "We have to convince the king's messenger that we're capable of producing an heir immediately. If he reports back that we've only been married 1 day, he'll recommend that your cousin inherit instead." Isabella finished. "Exactly." They walked to Alexander's study together. The messenger was a thin, serious man in royal livery. He stood when Alexander entered. "Your Grace," the messenger said formally, "I am Sir William Hartwell, sent by His Majesty King George to assess your progress in fulfilling the royal decree." "Sir William," Alexander nodded. "I trust your journey from London was comfortable." "Quite," Sir William said. He produced a scroll from his jacket. "I have here the king's instructions. I am to determine whether you have secured a suitable wife and are progressing toward the production of an heir." Alexander felt Isabella's hand slip into his. Her fingers were cold but steady. "I am pleased to report that I have indeed secured a wife," Alexander said. "May I present her Grace, Isabella Blackthorne, Duchess of Ravenswood." Isabella curtsied gracefully. "Sir William." Sir William looked Isabella up and down appraisingly. Alexander fought the urge to step protectively in front of his wife. "When did this marriage take place?" Sir William asked. "Last evening," Alexander said, trying to keep his voice confident. Sir William's eyebrows rose. "Last evening? How convenient. And has the marriage been consummated?" Alexander felt his face flush red. Isabella squeezed his hand tighter. "That is a rather personal question, Sir William," Alexander said stiffly. "Nevertheless, it is the question His Majesty requires me to ask. The purpose of this marriage is to produce an heir. If the marriage has not been consummated, then no progress has been made." Alexander's jaw clenched. The humiliation of having his most intimate moments scrutinized by the crown was almost unbearable. "The marriage has been consummated," he said through gritted teeth. "Excellent," Sir William made a note on his scroll. "And when might His Majesty expect to hear news of a pregnancy?" "That is not something we can predict with certainty." Isabella spoke up, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "But we are hopeful that it will be soon." Sir William studied Isabella carefully. "Your Grace appears to be a healthy young woman. and his grace is in his prime. I see no reason why conception should be delayed. No reason at all, Alexander agreed, though his stomach churned with anxiety. Very well, Sir William said. I shall remain at Ravenswood for 1 week to observe your household. At the end of that week, I will report back to His Majesty on your progress and my assessment of the likelihood of a successful outcome. 1 week. 7 days to convince the king's messenger that their hastily arranged marriage was a love match destined to produce heirs. 7 days to prove they were a real couple, not just two desperate people who had found each other in a storm. Of course, Alexander said, you are welcome to stay as long as necessary. After Sir William was shown to his rooms, Alexander and Isabella retreated to the privacy of the garden. 1 week, Isabella said, pacing among the rose bushes. How are we supposed to convince him we're madly in love and likely to conceive when we've been married for less than 24 hours? We act the part, Alexander said, though he felt far from confident. We behave like a couple who are desperately in love and eager to start a family. But what if I don't conceive right away? Isabella asked, turning to face him. Alexander, some women try for months or years to have a baby. What if we're not lucky enough to succeed immediately? Alexander had been trying not to think about that possibility. If Isabella didn't conceive within the next few months, he would lose everything. Lord Edmund would become the Duke of Ravenswood, and Alexander would be left with nothing. Then we deal with that when it happens, he said, reaching for her hands. But Isabella, I need you to know that whatever happens, I don't regret marrying you. Even if we lose the title, even if we have to start over with nothing, I'm grateful for what we have. Isabella smiled sadly. You might not feel that way when you're poor and powerless because of me. Hey, Alexander said, pulling her closer. Look at me. You didn't cause this problem. My mother did when she raised me to fear intimacy. The king did when he made these ridiculous demands. You're the solution, not the problem. Isabella leaned into his embrace. I just want to be enough for you, she whispered. You are everything to me, Alexander said fiercely. Everything. That evening at dinner, Sir William observed their every interaction. Alexander and Isabella did their best to appear like a loving couple, but their nervousness showed. Tell me, Your Grace, Sir William said to Isabella over the soup course. How did you and His Grace meet? Isabella glanced at Alexander before answering. It was very romantic, actually. I was caught in the storm last night and sought shelter at Ravenswood Castle. His Grace was kind enough to offer me sanctuary. And you fell in love immediately? Sir William asked with obvious skepticism. Sometimes love strikes like lightning, Isabella said, meeting Alexander's eyes across the table. Sudden and powerful and impossible to deny. Alexander felt his heart skip a beat. The way Isabella looked at him, spoke about him, made him wonder if she was still acting or if her feelings were becoming real. Indeed, Sir William said dryly. How fortunate that His Grace's need for a wife coincided so perfectly with your need for shelter. The implication was clear. Sir William suspected their marriage was purely one of convenience. Fortune had nothing to do with it, Alexander said firmly. It was fate. Isabella is everything I never knew I was looking for. And His Grace is everything I always dreamed of finding, Isabella added softly. For a moment, their eyes locked across the table, and Alexander forgot Sir William was even there. The emotion in Isabella's voice seemed real. The warmth in her gaze seemed genuine. Maybe they were both better actors than he thought. Or maybe, just maybe, something real was growing between them. After dinner, Sir William requested a private audience with Alexander. Your Grace, Sir William said once they were alone in the study, I must speak plainly. His Majesty is concerned about the timing of your marriage. What do you mean? Alexander asked, though he suspected he knew. You have known for nearly a year that you needed to secure an heir, yet you waited until the final weeks to marry. This suggests either poor planning or desperation. Alexander's hands clenched behind his back. I prefer to think of it as finding the right woman at the right time. Perhaps, Sir William said. But His Majesty is also concerned about your experience in matters of marriage and procreation. Alexander felt his blood run cold. My experience? Your Grace, you are 35 years old and have never shown interest in women. There are rumors about your preferences. Alexander realized with horror what Sir William was implying. The court thought he preferred men to women, that his lack of romantic entanglements meant he was incapable of fulfilling his duties as a husband. Those rumors are completely false, Alexander said hotly. I have simply been selective. Of course, Your Grace, but His Majesty requires proof that you are capable of producing an heir. Not just willing, but capable. And how exactly does His Majesty propose I provide such proof? Alexander asked through gritted teeth. A pregnancy would be ideal, of course. But barring that, some evidence of vigorous attempts at conception would be reassuring. Alexander stared at the man in disgust. The king wanted evidence that he was bedding his wife regularly and enthusiastically. The invasion of privacy was complete and humiliating. I can assure you that my wife and I are compatible in every way, Alexander said stiffly. Excellent, Sir William smiled coldly. Then I'm sure His Majesty will have nothing to worry about. That night, Alexander paced his bedroom while Isabella brushed her hair by the fireplace. He suspects, Alexander said for the 10th time. He knows something is off about our marriage. Alexander, you're going to wear a hole in the carpet, Isabella said gently. Come sit down. Alexander collapsed into the chair beside her. Isabella set down her brush and turned to face him. Tell me exactly what Sir William said, she requested. Alexander related the conversation, watching Isabella's face grow more troubled with each detail. So he wants proof that we're intimate, she said when he finished. Yes, and I have no idea how to provide that without without the obvious. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. Maybe we don't have to prove anything, she said. Maybe we just have to stop caring what he thinks. What do you mean? Isabella stood and walked to the window. The storm had passed, leaving the night clear and star-filled. I mean, we're trying so hard to convince Sir William that we're in love, that we're forgetting to actually be in love, she said. We're acting like we have something to hide instead of something to celebrate. Alexander joined her at the window. We do have something to hide. We barely know each other. We got married out of desperation, not love. Did we? Isabella asked, turning to look at him. Alexander, what did you feel when you saw me running toward your castle? Alexander thought back to that moment. The lightning illuminating Isabella's desperate flight, the way his heart had pounded as he raced to open the doors. I felt protective, he said slowly. And something else, something I'd never felt before. What? Recognition, Alexander said, the word surprising him. Like I was seeing something I'd been waiting for my whole life without knowing it. Isabella smiled. That's what I felt too. When you opened those doors and I saw your face, I thought, this is the man I've been waiting for. Not because you could save me from Lord Camden, but because you looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth saving. Alexander cupped her face in his hands. You are worth saving. You're worth everything. Then, let's stop pretending to be in love, Isabella whispered, and start actually being in love. Alexander kissed her then, and this time there was nothing tentative about it. nothing fearful or uncertain. This kiss was full of passion and promise and hope for the future. When they separated, both were breathing hard. "Isabella," Alexander said against her lips. "Yes, I think I'm already there. In love, I mean. Completely and utterly in love with you." Isabella's smile was radiant. "Then we're going to be just fine," she said. "All of us. You, me, and the baby we're going to make. Are you certain you want children with me?" Alexander asked, "Knowing how inexperienced I am, knowing how much I still have to learn, I'm certain that I want everything with you," Isabella said. "Children, adventures, quiet mornings, stormy nights, all of it, for the rest of our lives." Alexander lifted Isabella in his arms and carried her to their bed. What happened next was not about duty or obligation or producing heirs for the king. It was about love, pure, desperate, overwhelming love between two people who had found each other against all odds. The next morning they were different. The awkwardness was gone, replaced by an easy intimacy that couldn't be faked. When Sir William observed them at breakfast, he saw a couple who touched naturally, who finished each other's sentences, who looked at each other with obvious affection. "You seem very happy this morning, Your Grace," Sir William commented to Isabella. Isabella blushed, but didn't look away from Alexander. "I am very happy, Sir William. Happier than I've ever been in my life. And you, Your Grace?" Sir William asked Alexander. "I feel like the luckiest man in England," Alexander said sincerely. "To have found a woman like Isabella, to have earned her love, it's more than I ever dared hope for." Sir William made notes on his ever-present scroll, but his expression had softened slightly. The days that followed were like a dream. Alexander and Isabella spent every moment together, learning about each other's hopes and fears and dreams. They walked through the gardens hand in hand. They shared long dinners by candlelight. They talked late into the night about everything and nothing. And they made love, often and passionately, and with growing confidence and skill. What had started as awkward fumbling became something beautiful and natural and right. On the 5th day of Sir William's visit, Alexander woke to find Isabella retching violently into the chamber pot. "Isabella," he cried, rushing to her side. "What's wrong? Are you ill?" Isabella looked up at him with tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. "I'm not ill," she said weakly. I think I might be pregnant." Alexander's world stopped. Pregnant. After less than a week of marriage, Isabella might already be carrying his child. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm late," Isabella said, "and this morning's sickness, my mother told me about it. She said it was one of the first signs." Alexander helped Isabella back to bed and called for the castle physician immediately. Dr. Whitmore was an elderly man who had served the Blackthorne family for decades. "Well, Your Grace," Dr. Whitmore said after examining Isabella, "it's still very early, but all the signs point to pregnancy. Congratulations." Alexander felt his knees go weak with relief. An heir. Isabella was going to give him an heir. They had done it. Against all odds, they had succeeded. "How long?" Alexander asked. "Based on Her Grace's symptoms, I would estimate she conceived within the first few days of your marriage. The child should arrive in approximately 8 months. Alexander sank into the chair beside the bed and took Isabella's hand. She squeezed his fingers tightly. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." "You did it," Alexander corrected. "You saved us both." When Sir William heard the news, his entire demeanor changed. The skeptical, suspicious messenger was replaced by a man full of congratulations and approval. "His Majesty will be delighted," Sir William said, making careful notes. A pregnancy achieved so quickly suggests strong compatibility and enthusiasm on both parts. Alexander and Isabella exchanged glances, both fighting smiles. "We are indeed enthusiastic about our marriage," Alexander said gravely. "Quite enthusiastic," Isabella agreed, her eyes dancing with mirth. Sir William departed the next morning with glowing reports for the king. The Duke of Ravenswood had secured not only a wife, but a pregnant wife. The Blackthorn line would continue. After Sir William's carriage disappeared down the drive, Alexander and Isabella stood together on the castle steps. "It's over," Isabella said. "We're safe." "We're more than safe," Alexander said, pulling her close. "We're happy, we're in love, and we're going to be parents." Isabella leaned into his embrace, her hand moving instinctively to her still flat stomach. "Do you think it will be a boy or a girl?" she asked. "I don't care," Alexander said honestly. "As long as the baby is healthy and has your eyes." "I hope it has your strength," Isabella said, "and your kindness." "Our child will have the best of both of us," Alexander said, "and more love than any child has ever known." But their happiness was interrupted one final time. A week later, Lord Camden returned to Ravenswood Castle. This time, he brought lawyers. "Your Grace," Camden said with mock courtesy, "I've come to discuss the matter of my property." "Isabella is not your property," Alexander said coldly. "She is my wife, and the future mother of my heir." Camden's face twisted with rage at the mention of Isabella's pregnancy. "Property that was sold cannot be resold without the consent of the original purchaser," Camden said. "I have legal precedent on my side." "And I have the law on mine," Alexander replied. "No contract can supersede the sanctity of marriage." "We'll see about that," Camden snarled. "I'll take this to the highest courts in the land. I'll see you ruined for this theft." "Try it," Alexander said quietly. "But before you do, perhaps you should consider who you're threatening. I am the Duke of Ravenswood. I have the ear of the king himself. My wife is carrying the future heir to one of the most powerful titles in England. Do you really think any court will side with you against us?" Camden looked between Alexander and Isabella, his face growing redder with each passing moment. "Furthermore," Alexander continued, "if you persist in this harassment, I will have you investigated for human trafficking. Buying and selling women is illegal in England, regardless of what contracts you may have signed." Camden's lawyers whispered urgently in his ear. After a few moments, Camden's shoulders sagged in defeat. "This isn't over," he muttered, but the fight had gone out of him. "Yes, it is," Alexander said firmly. "Leave my lands and never return. If I see you near my wife again, I'll have you arrested." Camden and his lawyers departed in defeat. Isabella watched their carriage disappear with tears of relief in her eyes. "It's really over," she said. "We're really free." "We're free," Alexander agreed. "Free to love each other, free to raise our children, free to build the life we want together." 6 months later, Isabella gave birth to a healthy son they named James, after Alexander's father. The boy had his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. He was perfect in every way. Alexander held his son for the first time with tears streaming down his face. "I never thought I could have this," he whispered to Isabella. "A family, love, happiness, and I never thought anyone would want me for more than what they could get from me." Isabella replied, "But you wanted me for myself. You saw me as more than property or a burden." "You are everything to me," Alexander said, kissing Isabella's forehead. "You and James, my whole world, and you are ours," Isabella said softly. A year later, Isabella gave birth to twin daughters, Elizabeth and Catherine. 3 years after that, another son arrived, followed by 2 more daughters over the next 5 years. Alexander proved to be a devoted father and husband. The castle that had once echoed with loneliness now rang with children's laughter. The Ice Duke became known throughout England for his warmth, his generosity, and his obvious adoration of his family. Isabella blossomed into her role as Duchess. She established schools for poor children, hospitals for the sick, and shelters for women fleeing bad situations. She never forgot what it felt like to be powerless, and she used her position to help others who found themselves in similar circumstances. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Alexander and Isabella stood in the same garden where they had first confessed their love. "Do you ever regret it?" Alexander asked, holding Isabella close. "Marrying a man you barely knew? Taking such a tremendous risk?" Isabella smiled up at him, her face older now but no less beautiful. "Never," she said firmly. "You saved me, Alexander, not just from Lord Camden, but from a life without love, without purpose, without hope." "You saved me too," Alexander said, "from loneliness, from fear, from a life half-lived." "We saved each other," Isabella corrected, "and we built something beautiful together." Around them, their 6 children played in the garden, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. James, now 9, was teaching his younger siblings to catch fireflies. The twins, 8 years old, were picking flowers for their mother. The youngest 3, all under 5, tumbled together on the grass like puppies. "Look at what we created," Isabella marveled. "All this love, all this life, all from one desperate night in a storm." "Not from desperation," Alexander said, kissing the top of her head. "From fate, from love, from 2 people brave enough to take a chance on each other." "I love you, Alexander Blackthorne," Isabella said. "And I love you, Isabella Blackthorne," Alexander replied, "forever and always." As the sun set over Ravenswood Castle, the family gathered inside for dinner. The great hall that had once been silent and cold was now filled with warmth, conversation and love. Alexander looked around the table at his wife and children and felt his heart swell with gratitude. He had been given so much more than he had ever dared to dream, not just an heir to continue his bloodline, but a legacy of love that would last for generations. And it all started with a confession that had terrified him: "I've never been with a woman." That confession, spoken in desperation and shame, had led to the greatest love story of his life. Sometimes our weaknesses become our greatest strengths. Sometimes our deepest fears lead us to our greatest joys. Sometimes a storm brings us exactly what we've been waiting for, even when we didn't know we were waiting. Alexander Blackthorne, the Duke of Ravenswood, had learned that lesson well, and he spent the rest of his long and happy life teaching it to his children and grandchildren. Love, he told them, often comes when we least expect it, and in ways we never could have imagined. But when it arrives, we must be brave enough to embrace it, no matter how frightening it might seem. Because love, true love, is always worth the risk. Welcome back to another story that will leave you breathless. Before we start, make sure to hit that like button if you're ready for a tale of forbidden love that changes everything, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Tonight's story takes us to the darkest corners of medieval England, where power rules everything and one woman's secret could destroy a kingdom. Are you ready? Let's begin. The rain pounded against the stone walls of Blackmore Castle like angry fists demanding entry. Inside the great hall, Lord Adrian Blackthorne sat in his ornate chair, his cold grey eyes fixed on the trembling girl before him. She couldn't be more than 20, with long brown hair that hung in wet strands around her pale face. "You know why you're here," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Emma Carter kept her eyes on the floor. Her father's gambling debts had finally caught up with them. 300 gold pieces, more money than their small farm could ever produce in 10 lifetimes. Your father owes me a debt he cannot pay, Lord Adrian continued, standing slowly. His tall frame cast a long shadow across the cold stone floor. But I am not without mercy. I have a proposal. Emma's heart hammered in her chest. She had heard the stories about Lord Blackthorn, the cruel lord who took what he wanted without question, the man who had never shown kindness to anyone beneath his station. You will come to my chambers tonight, he said, walking closer. Give me your first night, your innocence, and I will consider your father's debt settled. The words hit her like physical blows. Emma's knees nearly buckled. She thought of her sick father lying in their cottage, of her little sister who needed medicine they could never afford. I need time to think, she whispered. Adrian's laugh was harsh. You have until sunset. Refuse, and your family loses everything. Your father will rot in my dungeons until the debt is paid, which, as we both know, will be never. As Emma was escorted from the castle, she felt the weight of an impossible choice. But what Lord Adrian didn't know was that Emma Carter was not just a simple farmer's daughter. Hidden beneath her rough peasant clothes was a secret that could change everything. That evening, as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Emma stood at the castle gates once more. This time, she wore a simple white dress, the only good dress she owned. Her hands shook as the guards led her through the winding corridors to the Lord's private chambers. You came, Adrian said when she entered. He had changed from his formal robes into a simple white shirt and dark pants. Even in casual clothes he was intimidating. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp features that looked carved from stone. I had no choice, Emma replied, her voice barely above a whisper. There is always a choice, he said, pouring wine from an ornate bottle. You chose your family over yourself. Some might call that noble. Emma said nothing. She watched as he moved around the room, lighting candles. The warm glow softened his harsh features slightly, but his eyes remained cold. Tell me, he said, turning to face her. Are you afraid of me? The question caught her off guard. Should I be? Something flickered across his face, so quickly she almost missed it. Most people haven't seen what I've seen, Emma said before she could stop herself. Adrian raised an eyebrow. And what exactly have you seen, little farm girl? Emma bit her tongue. She had already said too much. If he discovered the truth about who she really was. No, she couldn't think about that now. Nothing, my lord. I misspoke. But Adrian was studying her with new interest. There was something about this girl, the way she carried herself, the way she spoke. It wasn't quite right for a peasant's daughter. Come here, he commanded. Emma's feet felt like lead, but she forced herself to walk toward him. When she was close enough to touch, he reached out and tilted her chin up with one finger. Look at me, he said softly. Their eyes met, and Emma felt something electric pass between them. His grey eyes weren't as cold as she had thought. There was something else there. Pain, perhaps. Loneliness. You have beautiful eyes, he said, his voice gentler than before. Blue as sapphires. Strange, for a farmer's daughter. Emma's heart raced. She had to be careful. My mother, she was said to be beautiful. Was. She died when I was young. Adrian nodded slowly. Mine as well. The admission hung between them. For a moment, Emma forgot who she was supposed to be. How old were you? 7. She died in childbirth. The baby died too. His jaw tightened. My father never forgave me for surviving when they didn't. Emma felt a stab of sympathy. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? Adrian's laugh was bitter. I've spent my entire life trying to be the son he wanted. Cold, ruthless, powerful. Perhaps if I had been, perhaps she would still be alive. You can't know that, Emma said softly. Sometimes terrible things happen for no reason at all. Adrian stared at her. No one had ever spoken to him like this, with such gentle certainty, as if she understood pain deeper than his own. You speak strangely for a peasant girl, he said. Emma's blood ran cold. I learned to read from the village priest. He said I was quick with words. It wasn't entirely a lie. She had learned from priests, just not village ones. Adrian circled her slowly, like a predator studying its prey. Take down your hair. With trembling fingers, Emma pulled out the simple pins holding her hair in place. It cascaded down her back in waves of chestnut brown. Adrian reached out and touched a strand, letting it slip through his fingers like silk. Beautiful, he murmured. Then his voice hardened again. But beauty means nothing without obedience. You understand why you're here. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. Then you understand what I expect from you. She closed her eyes. This was it, the moment she had been dreading. But as she waited for him to touch her, to claim what he believed he was owed, nothing happened. When she opened her eyes, Adrian was standing by the window, his back to her. I can't do this, he said quietly. Emma blinked in confusion. My lord? You're terrified. I can see it in every line of your body. He turned around, and his face was different somehow. Less harsh. I may be many things, but I am not a monster. But the debt will be forgiven. Emma stared at him in shock. I don't understand. Neither do I, Adrian admitted. But something about you, I can't explain it. You make me want to be better than I am. Tears sprang to Emma's eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, Adrian said grimly. My steward will expect proof that our arrangement was completed. You'll need to stay the night. Sleep in my bed. In the morning, everyone will assume I understand. Adrian nodded toward a screen in the corner. You can change behind there. I'll sleep on the chair. As Emma changed into a nightgown that had been laid out for her, her mind raced. Lord Blackthorne was nothing like she had expected. The cruel, heartless man she had heard about was nowhere to be found. Instead, she saw someone lonely, damaged, trying to be better than the world expected him to be. When she emerged from behind the screen, Adrian was adding logs to the fire. He had removed his shirt and she could see the scars that crisscrossed his back. Battle scars, she realized. This man had fought for everything he had. My lord? She said softly. He turned, and she saw his eyes widen as he took in her appearance. The nightgown was simple but flattering, and with her hair loose around her shoulders, she looked like something from a fairy tale. You should sleep, he said, his voice rough. Emma nodded, and climbed into the enormous bed. The sheets were softer than anything she had ever felt. She watched as Adrian settled into a chair by the fire, pulling a blanket around himself. This is your bed, she said. I can't let you sleep in a chair. I've slept in worse places. That's not the point. Adrian looked at her with those penetrating grey eyes. What are you suggesting? Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. The bed is large enough for two people. We could put pillows between us as a barrier. For a long moment, Adrian said nothing. Then he stood and walked slowly toward the bed. You're certain? Emma nodded, though her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Adrian climbed into the bed on the far side, placing several pillows between them as she had suggested. They lay in the darkness, neither speaking, both acutely aware of the other's presence. Tell me about your family, Adrian said finally. Emma thought carefully before answering. My father is a good man. He worked hard his whole life, but bad harvests and my mother's medical bills, the debt grew too large. And your sister? Sarah. She's only 15. She wants to be a teacher someday. She's so smart, smarter than anyone I know. She deserves better than what? Than the life we can give her. Adrian was quiet for a moment. What about you? What do you want? The question surprised Emma. No one had ever asked her that before. I don't know, she admitted. I've spent so long taking care of everyone else, I've never thought about what I might want for myself. Think about it now. Emma stared at the ceiling, trying to imagine a life where she could make her own choices. I think I'd like to travel, see the world beyond our little village. Maybe help people who are hurting, the way my father and I hurt. You have a kind heart, Adrian said softly. Do you really think so? I know so. You could have run tonight, disappeared into the forest. Instead, you came here to save your family. Emma turned on her side to face him, even though she could barely see his outline in the darkness. What about you? If you could be anything other than a lord, what would you be? Adrian was quiet for so long she thought he had fallen asleep. I used to want to be a scholar, he said finally. Strange, isn't it? The cruel Lord Blackthorn dreaming of books instead of battles. It's not strange at all. What would you study? History? Philosophy? I wanted to understand why the world is the way it is, why people hurt each other, why some have so much while others have so little. Emma felt a pang of recognition. This was a conversation she might have had with... No. She couldn't think about that life. That person didn't exist anymore. It's not too late, she said. You could still study those things. Adrian's laugh was sad. Lords don't become scholars, Emma. We become what our fathers were, and their fathers before them. It's the way things have always been. Maybe it's time for things to change. The words hung between them in the darkness. Emma realized she had spoken with more authority than a peasant girl should possess. But Adrian didn't seem to notice. You're very wise for someone so young, he said. Sometimes wisdom comes from suffering. Yes, Adrian agreed quietly. It does. They talked until the early hours of the morning, sharing stories and dreams they had never spoken aloud to anyone. When Emma finally drifted off to sleep, she felt safer than she had in months. She woke to find Adrian already dressed and standing by the window. Sunlight streamed through the glass, painting everything golden. Good morning, she said, sitting up and pushing her hair back from her face. Adrian turned, and she saw something new in his expression, warmth. Good morning, did you sleep well? Better than I have in a long time. He walked over and sat on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Emma, I want you to know, last night meant something to me, more than I can explain. Emma felt her heart flutter. It meant something to me too. I've been thinking about what you said, about change, about being better than what's expected. He took a deep breath. I want to offer you something. What do you mean? Stay at the castle. Not as my mistress, as a companion. Someone to talk to help me figure out how to be the kind of man my people deserve. Emma stared at him in shock. I couldn't. My family would be taken care of, your father's debt forgiven, of course, but more than that. I could arrange for your sister to receive an education, real teachers, proper books. She could become whatever she wants to be. Emma's eyes filled with tears. It was everything she had ever wanted for Sarah. But accepting would mean living a lie, pretending to be someone she wasn't. Why, she whispered, why would you do this for me? Adrian reached out and gently touched her face, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. Because in one night you've shown me more kindness than I've known in 28 years of life. Because when you look at me, you don't see a monster, you see a man. Emma closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, despite herself. Adrian, say yes, Emma, please. The word escaped before she could stop it. Yes. Adrian's smile transformed his entire face. For the first time, Emma saw the scholar he had once dreamed of becoming. The gentle, thoughtful man hidden beneath the Lord's cold mask. There's just one thing, she said quickly. I need to go home first, to tell my family, to arrange things. Of course, I'll send an escort with you. No, Emma said, perhaps too sharply. I mean, they'll be frightened if soldiers come to our cottage. Let me go alone. I'll return this afternoon. Adrian hesitated, then nodded. Very well. But promise me you'll come back. I promise. But as Emma rode away from the castle on the horse Adrian had given her, her heart was breaking. She couldn't stay. Not when keeping her secret meant lying to a man who was beginning to mean everything to her. When she reached the small cottage she had called home for the past 3 years, her father was waiting for her. Emma, Thomas Carter embraced his daughter tightly. Thank God you're safe. When you didn't return last night, I feared the worst. I'm fine, Father. Better than fine. Lord Blackthorn has forgiven your debt. Thomas pulled back to look at her. How? What did you have to do? Emma met his worried gaze steadily. Nothing I didn't choose to do. It wasn't entirely a lie. She had chosen to trust Adrian. She had chosen to see the good in him, even if she couldn't choose to stay. There's something else, she continued. He's offered Sarah a place at the castle, an education. She could learn from real teachers, study with tutors. Sarah, who had been listening from the doorway, gasped. Emma, are you serious? Completely serious. It's what you've always wanted. But what about you? Sarah asked. What about us? Emma felt her carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. I have to go away for a while. Go away where? Thomas demanded. Emma, what aren't you telling us? Before Emma could answer, the sound of horses approaching made them all freeze. Through the window, Emma could see riders wearing the colors of the Royal Guard approaching their cottage. Her blood turned to ice. Emma Carter, the lead rider, called out, By order of His Majesty King Edward, you are commanded to return to court immediately. Thomas looked at his daughter in shock. Taught, Emma? What's he talking about? Emma closed her eyes, knowing that her carefully built life was about to crumble around her. I can explain everything, she said quietly. But Sarah had already recognized something in the lead rider's bearing, in the formal way he addressed Emma. You're not really our sister, are you? She said, her voice small and hurt. Emma's heart shattered. Sarah, please. Lady Emmeline Ravencrest, the captain continued, his voice carrying across the small clearing. Your presence is required at court. Your betrothal to the Duke of Westmarch has been finalized. Thomas stepped protectively in front of Emma, even though he was clearly confused. There's been some mistake. This is my daughter, Emma Carter. She's a farmer's daughter, not some lady. The captain's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry, sir, but this is Lady Emmeline Ravencrest, daughter of the late Earl of Ravencrest. She disappeared 3 years ago after her parents' death. We've been searching for her ever since. Emmeline stepped forward, her shoulders straight despite the tears streaming down her face. It's true, she said quietly. My name is Lady Emmeline Ravencrest. But Thomas Carter is more of a father to me than my blood father ever was, and Sarah is the sister of my heart, even if not my blood. She turned to the man who had raised her as his own daughter for 3 years. Father, I need you to understand. When my parents died, I ran. I couldn't bear the thought of being married off to some stranger, of living a life that wasn't mine. I found you and Sarah during the worst storm of my life, and you took me in without question. You gave me the family I never had. Thomas's eyes were soft with understanding now. Oh, child, you were so thin, so frightened when you came to us. We never questioned your story because it didn't matter. You were ours from the moment you walked through that door, and you always will be, Emma said fiercely. Nothing changes that. Nothing. The captain cleared his throat respectfully. My lady, we must go. The king is most anxious for your return. Emma nodded, then turned back to her family. I'll find a way out of this betrothal, somehow, and when I do, I'll make sure you're both taken care of. I promise. As she prepared to leave with the guards, Sarah grabbed her arm. What about Lord Blackthorne? She whispered. You care for him, don't you? I could see it in your face when you came back. Emma's heart clenched. It doesn't matter now. He could never care for someone who lied to him the way I did. But Emma, Lady Emmeline, the captain interrupted gently, we really must go. As Emma rode away with the royal guard, she looked back one last time at the cottage that had been her sanctuary, at the family who had loved her without conditions, and somewhere in the distance she could see the towers of Blackmore Castle, where a lonely lord was waiting for a woman who would never return. At the castle, Adrian paced his chambers like a caged wolf. The sun was setting, and there was still no sign of Emma. She had promised to return by afternoon. My lord? His steward Marcus knocked on the door. What is it? Adrian snapped. There's been news from the village, sir. The royal guard passed through this morning. They took someone from the Carter cottage. Adrian's blood ran cold. Took someone? The girl, my lord, Emma Carter. Adrian was moving before Marcus finished speaking, shouting for his horse to be saddled. He rode to the Carter cottage at breakneck speed, his heart pounding with fear. He found Thomas Carter sitting on his doorstep, looking older than his years. Where is she? Adrian demanded, dismounting before his horse had fully stopped. Thomas looked up at the lord, with eyes full of pain. Gone. Taken by the king's men. Why? What crime could she possibly have committed? Thomas stood slowly. No crime, my lord. She isn't who we thought she was, who any of us thought she was. What do you mean? Her real name is Lady Emmeline Ravencrest, daughter of an earl. She's been betrothed to the Duke of Westmarch. Adrian felt as if he had been struck by lightning. That's impossible. Emma is a farmer's daughter. She ran away 3 years ago when her parents died, came to us during a storm, half dead from cold and hunger. We took her in, raised her as our own. Thomas's voice was heavy with grief. She said nothing changes that we're still her family. But the king's men, they took her back to court. Adrian stared at the older man, trying to process what he was hearing. Emma was Lady Emmeline Ravencrest, a noblewoman far above his station, betrothed to another man. She didn't want to go, Sarah said quietly from the doorway. She was crying when they took her away. She said she'd find a way out of the betrothal, that she'd come back to us. Adrian's mind raced. If Emma was truly Lady Emmeline Ravencrest, then her betrothal to the Duke of Westmarch was a political alliance of the highest importance. The king would never allow her to simply break it. Unless, how long ago did they take her? He asked urgently. This morning, Thomas replied. They're probably halfway to the capital by now. Adrian was already moving toward his horse. If anyone asks, you haven't seen me. My lord, where are you going? Adrian's smile was grim as he mounted his horse. to court, to bring her home. Meanwhile, Emma sat in a lavishly appointed carriage, watching the countryside roll by through tear-blurred eyes. She wore a travelling dress of deep blue silk that had been waiting for her at the first inn where they stopped. A lady's dress, befitting her station. She hated it. For 3 years, she had been free to make her own choices, to be judged by her actions rather than her bloodline, free to fall in love with a man who saw her as she truly was, not as a political pawn. And now it was over. "We should reach the capital by tomorrow evening," the captain said, trying to make conversation. "I'm sure you're eager to see the court again." Emma said nothing. She had no desire to see the court again. No desire to be paraded before the Duke of Westmarch like a prize to be won. That night, as they stopped at another inn, Emma lay awake, planning her escape. She could steal a horse, ride back to Adrian before he discovered her deception. But what then? Even if he could forgive her lies, she was still betrothed to another man, still bound by laws and traditions she had no power to break. As dawn broke, she was no closer to a solution. The royal palace loomed before them like a golden prison. Emma had forgotten how massive it was, how overwhelming. Servants and courtiers bustled about the courtyards, all dressed in their finest clothes, all playing their parts in the elaborate game of court politics. Emma was escorted to chambers that had been prepared for her, rooms far more luxurious than anything at Blackmore Castle, but they felt cold and empty by comparison. "Lady Emmeline," a familiar voice said from the doorway. Emma turned to see Lady Margaret Ashford, her former companion and one of the few people at court she had genuinely liked. "Margaret." Emma accepted her friend's embrace, grateful for a friendly face. "Thank God you're safe," Margaret said, pulling back to look at her. "When you disappeared after your parents' funeral, we feared the worst. Where have you been all this time?" "Living," Emma said simply. Margaret studied her face. "You look different. Happier, somehow. Despite everything." "I was happier, for a while." "Tell me everything," Margaret said, settling into a chair. "And don't leave out a single detail." Emma found herself telling Margaret about her life at the Carter cottage, about Sarah's dreams of becoming a teacher, about Thomas's gentle kindness. And despite herself, she found herself telling Margaret about Adrian. "You love him," Margaret said when Emma finished. "It doesn't matter now." "Of course it matters. Love always matters. Not when you're betrothed to someone else. Not when you're a political pawn in the king's games." Margaret was quiet for a moment. The Duke of Westmarch arrived at court yesterday. Emma's heart sank. "What's he like?" "Old. Wealthy. Looking for a young wife to give him heirs." Margaret's expression was sympathetic. "I won't lie to you, Emma. This marriage is important to the king. The Duke controls the western ports, and his loyalty is crucial for trade with France. So my happiness is worth less than trade agreements." In the eyes of the crown, yes. Emma walked to the window, looking out over the palace gardens. Somewhere out there, Adrian was probably wondering why she had broken her promise to return. By now he might have discovered the truth about who she really was. He probably hated her for lying to him. The thought made her heart ache. "There's something else," Margaret said carefully. "The wedding has been set for next week." Emma spun around.
"Next week?"
"But I just arrived. The king is eager to secure the alliance, and the Duke, he's not a patient man." Emma felt the walls closing in around her. 1 week. She had 1 week before she became the wife of a man she had never met, bound to a life that would slowly kill her spirit. "I need some air," she said. "Emma, you can't just—" "I'm going for a walk in the gardens. I'm not going to run away. Not yet." Margaret looked as if she wanted to argue, but something in Emma's expression stopped her. The palace gardens were as beautiful as Emma remembered, but she barely noticed the flowers or the fountains. Her mind was spinning, trying to find some way out of the trap that was closing around her. Lady Emmeline. Emma turned at the unfamiliar voice and found herself face to face with a tall, silver-haired man dressed in rich robes. Everything about him screamed wealth and power and cruelty. "Your Grace," she said, dropping into a curtsy. She didn't need to be told who this was. The Duke of Westmarch smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're even more beautiful than I was told. I can see why you were considered such a prize on the marriage market." Emma's skin crawled at the way he looked at her, like she was a horse he was considering purchasing. "I'm honored by your words, Your Grace." "Are you?" His smile turned predatory. "I wonder, you've been missing for 3 years. Living among peasants, I'm told. I hope you haven't developed any unfortunate habits during your absence." "I'm not sure what you mean." The Duke stepped closer, and Emma caught the smell of wine on his breath, despite the early hour. "I mean that I expect my wife to be pure, untouched. I won't tolerate a woman who has given herself to lesser men." Emma's temper flared. "I assure you, Your Grace, that my virtue remains intact." "Good, though I suppose it doesn't matter much either way. Once we're wed, you'll learn to please only me." Emma forced herself to remain calm. "Your Grace, perhaps we could postpone the wedding. Give ourselves time to get to know each other better." The Duke laughed, a harsh sound that made Emma's skin crawl. "Get to know each other? My dear girl, this is a political alliance, not a love match. Your job is to give me sons and manage my household. Nothing more. And if I refuse?" The Duke's expression darkened. "You won't. The King has made it clear that this marriage will happen, with or without your cooperation." As he walked away, Emma felt despair wash over her. There truly was no way out. In 1 week, she would belong to that horrible man, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. But as she stood there in the garden fighting back tears, she heard a commotion from the main courtyard. Horses arriving at speed. Raised voices. Emma moved toward the sound, staying hidden behind a hedge. What she saw made her heart stop. Adrian Blackthorne was dismounting from his horse in the center of the courtyard, travel-stained and exhausted, but unmistakably himself. Palace guards were already moving toward him, hands on their sword hilts. "I demand an audience with His Majesty," Adrian was saying, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "Lord Blackthorne," one of the guards replied, "you have no business at court." "I have business with Lady Emmeline Ravencrest." Emma's breath caught. He had come for her. Despite everything, despite her lies, he had come. "The lady is betrothed to the Duke of Westmarch," the guard said firmly. "She is not available for audiences." "Then I'll speak to the King. His Majesty is in council. You'll have to wait." Emma watched as Adrian was escorted to the guest quarters, clearly under guard despite the courtesy shown to his rank. Her heart was racing. He was here, but what could he possibly do? Even a lord couldn't challenge a royal decree. That evening, Emma sat in her chambers, too nervous to eat the elaborate meal that had been prepared for her. Margaret sat across from her, equally tense. "He's been waiting to see the King all day," Margaret reported. "The whole court is talking about it. Lord Blackthorne, demanding an audience about a woman. It's unprecedented." "He shouldn't have come," Emma said, though her heart sang at the thought of Adrian fighting for her. "He'll only make things worse for himself. Maybe, or maybe he has a plan." Before Emma could respond, there was a knock at her door. A page entered and bowed deeply. "Lady Emmeline, His Majesty commands your presence in the Great Hall. Immediately." Emma's stomach clenched. Did he say why?
No, my lady, but Lord Blackthorn is there as well.
Emma exchanged glances with Margaret, then stood on shaking legs. Whatever was about to happen, it would determine the rest of her life. The great hall was packed with courtiers, all whispering excitedly among themselves. Emma entered to find King Edward seated on his throne, his expression unreadable. To his right stood the Duke of Westmarch, looking smug, and to his left, Adrian. Their eyes met across the vast hall, and Emma felt a jolt of electricity pass between them. Even exhausted and travel-worn, he was the most beautiful sight she had ever seen. "Lady Emmeline," the king said, his voice echoing through the hall. "Approach." Emma walked forward on unsteady legs, acutely aware of every eye in the room watching her. When she reached the throne, she dropped into a deep curtsy. "Your Majesty." "Rise, child. We have much to discuss." Emma stood, her hands clasped tightly in front of her to keep them from shaking. "Lord Blackthorn has made a most interesting petition," the king continued. "He claims that you are contracted to him, not to the Duke of Westmarch." Emma's eyes flew to Adrian's face. "What was he doing? Is this true, Lady Emmeline?" the king asked. Emma's mouth went dry. "Your Majesty, think carefully before you answer," the king warned. "False testimony before the crown is treason." Emma looked from Adrian to the Duke of Westmarch, who was glowering at her. Then she looked back at the king. "Your Majesty, Lord Blackthorn and I, we spent the night together, in his chambers. If he claims there was a contract between us, then—" The hall erupted in whispers. The Duke of Westmarch's face turned purple with rage. "You little whore," he snarled, stepping toward Emma. "You dare to claim you've been defiled by another man?" Adrian moved faster than lightning. Before the Duke could reach Emma, Adrian's fist connected with the older man's jaw, sending him sprawling to the floor. "Watch your tongue when you speak of the lady," Adrian growled. "Enough," the king roared, and the hall fell silent. "Guards, separate them." As the guards moved to restrain both men, the king turned his attention back to Emma. "You claim there was a contract between you and Lord Blackthorn." Emma's heart pounded. She was about to commit treason, to lie before the crown. But looking at Adrian's face, seeing the hope and love there, she knew she had to try. "Yes, Your Majesty." "A binding contract. Witnessed by whom?" Emma's mind raced. By his steward, Marcus. "And by the terms of the agreement that settled my family's debt to Lord Blackthorn." It was a desperate gamble. If the king chose to investigate thoroughly, her lies would be exposed. But perhaps. The king studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to Adrian. "Lord Blackthorn, is this true?" Adrian met the king's gaze steadily. "It is, Your Majesty. Lady Emmeline came to me to settle her father's debt. We came to an arrangement, and you can produce witnesses to this contract." "Of course, Your Majesty." Emma held her breath. Adrian was lying for her, risking everything to save her from a marriage she didn't want. The Duke of Westmarch struggled to his feet, his jaw already swelling. "This is outrageous. The girl is lying to avoid her obligations. She is betrothed to me. A betrothal that cannot stand if she has already given herself to another man," the king said coldly, "unless you're prepared to accept a bride who is no longer pure." The Duke's face contorted with rage. "I will not accept damaged goods." "Then it seems the matter is settled." The king's voice was final. "Lady Emmeline Ravencrest, if you have indeed entered into a binding agreement with Lord Blackthorn, then your betrothal to the Duke of Westmarch is void." Emma felt her knees buckle with relief. Adrian stepped forward to steady her, his strong arm around her waist. "However," the king continued, This puts us in a difficult position. The alliance with the Duke was important to the crown. Your Majesty, Adrian said, might I suggest an alternative arrangement? Speak. Lord Blackthorn, Adrian continued, controls significant lands along the northern border, lands that are crucial for trade with Scotland. Perhaps an alliance with House Blackthorn would serve the crown's interests equally well. Emma looked at Adrian in amazement. He was offering himself and his lands to secure her freedom. The king considered this. You would swear fealty directly to the crown, guarantee the security of the northern trade routes. Gladly, Your Majesty. With Lady Emmeline as my wife, our combined lands would stretch from the northern mountains to the eastern coast. A powerful alliance indeed. And what of your feelings in this matter, Lady Emmeline? The king asked. Are you prepared to honor this contract with Lord Blackthorn? Emma looked into Adrian's eyes and saw her future there. Not the cold, calculated marriage she had been facing, but a partnership built on love and mutual respect. Yes, Your Majesty, gladly. The king nodded slowly. Very well. The betrothal between Lady Emmeline Ravencrest and the Duke of Westmarch is hereby dissolved. Lady Emmeline, you will wed Lord Blackthorn within the month. The ceremony will take place at court to properly celebrate this new alliance. As the hall erupted in excited chatter, Emma felt Adrian's hand squeeze hers. Are you certain? He whispered. Once we do this, there's no going back. Emma smiled up at him, her heart full of love and hope. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The Duke of Westmarch stormed from the hall, but Emma barely noticed. Adrian was here, and somehow, miraculously, they were going to be together. Later that evening, Emma and Adrian walked through the palace gardens together, finally alone for the first time since her arrival at court. I can't believe you came, Emma said, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm. When I left that morning, I thought I'd never see you again.
Did you really think I would let you go so easily?
Adrian stopped walking and turned to face her. Emma, Emmeline, whoever you are, I love you, not your title, not your bloodline. You. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. I'm so sorry I lied to you. I wanted to tell you the truth. But you were protecting yourself. I understand. Adrian cupped her face gently. You spent your whole life being valued for your name and your dowry. You wanted someone to love you for who you really are. And do you love me for who I really am? I fell in love with a brave, kind woman who sacrificed herself to save her family, who talked to me like I was a man worth knowing, not just a title to be feared. That woman is you, regardless of what name you use. Emma stood on her toes and kissed him softly. I love you too. I think I loved you from the moment you decided not to claim what you thought you were owed. What about your family? Adrian asked. Thomas and Sarah. Emma smiled. They'll always be my family, but now they'll be your family too, if you'll have them. I'd be honored. As they stood there in the moonlight, Emma marveled at how much her life had changed. A week ago, she had been a simple farmer's daughter. Now she was about to become the wife of a lord, but more importantly, the wife of a man who loved her completely. Adrian. Yes? That first night, when you said you couldn't take what I wasn't freely giving, why? Adrian was quiet for a moment. Because I've seen what cruelty does to people. I've seen how power corrupts, how it makes men into monsters. I didn't want to become the kind of man my father was. Your father, he took what he wanted, when he wanted it, from servants, from peasant girls, from anyone too weak to fight back. I swore I would never be like him. Emma felt her heart clench with sympathy. You're nothing like that. You're kind and gentle and good. Only because of you. You make me want to be better, and you make me want to be braver. to fight for what matters. As they walked back toward the palace, Emma thought about the strange path that had led them to this moment, a debt that couldn't be paid. A night that changed everything, a lie that became the truth. What happens now? She asked. Now we get married, we combine our lands and create something new, something better. Adrian squeezed her hand, and we love each other for the rest of our lives. Emma smiled, her heart full of hope for the future. I can live with that. 3 weeks later, Emma stood in the palace chapel wearing a gown of ivory silk, her hair crowned with flowers. The ceremony was elaborate, befitting the importance of the alliance between their houses, but all Emma could see was Adrian waiting for her at the altar. He looked magnificent in his formal robes, but it was the love in his eyes that took her breath away. As she walked down the aisle, she saw familiar faces in the crowd, Thomas and Sarah, who had been brought to court for the wedding, beaming with pride and joy. When the priest asked if she would take Adrian as her husband, Emma's voice rang clear and strong through the chapel. I will. And when Adrian kissed her, sealing their union, Emma knew that she was finally, truly home. After the ceremony, as they celebrated with the court, Sarah pulled Emma aside. Are you happy? She asked. Emma looked across the room to where Adrian was talking with Thomas, the two men she loved most, clearly enjoying each other's company. Completely, she said. Good. Because Lord Blackthorn asked me something earlier. What? Sarah grinned. He asked if I would like to have tutors at the castle. He said his wife was going to need a clever sister-in-law to help her manage his lands. Emma felt tears of joy spring to her eyes. And what did you tell him? I told him that I thought Lord Blackthorn was the luckiest man in the kingdom, and that I couldn't wait to be his sister. As the celebration continued around them, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had started as Lady Emmeline Ravencrest, a pawn in political games. She had become Emma Carter, a farmer's daughter who found love in the most unexpected place. And now she was Lady Blackthorn, a woman who had fought for her own happiness and won. But most importantly, she was simply Emma, a woman loved completely by a man who saw her true self and chose her anyway. That night, as she and Adrian retired to their chambers as husband and wife, Emma finally felt the peace she had been searching for her entire life. No regrets? Adrian asked as he helped her remove the flowers from her hair. Emma turned in his arms and smiled. Only one. What's that? I regret that it took us so long to find each other. Adrian kissed her forehead gently. We found each other exactly when we were meant to. Not a moment sooner, not a moment later. As they held each other in the darkness, Emma knew he was right. Every trial, every hardship, every moment of pain had led them to this perfect moment. And now they had the rest of their lives to love each other. Adrian. Thank you. For what? Emma smiled against his chest. For seeing me, the real me. For fighting for us, when I couldn't fight for myself. Thank you for teaching me what love really means. For showing me that kindness isn't weakness. They talked quietly until dawn, planning their future together. They would return to Blackthorn Castle, where Thomas would oversee the farming operations and Sarah would have her tutors. They would rule their lands with justice and compassion, creating the kind of life they had both dreamed of. And every night, Emma would fall asleep in the arms of the man who had demanded her first night, but had instead given her his heart. The cruel lord who had become the love of her life. The man who had seen her secret identity not as a deception, but as proof that she was brave enough to create her own destiny. In the end, Emma realized the greatest secret identity of all was simply being herself, flaws and all, and finding someone who loved every part of that truth. As the sun rose on their first day as husband and wife, Emma Carter, Lady Emmeline Ravencrest, Lady Blackthorn, closed her eyes and smiled. She was finally, completely, utterly herself, and she was loved.